Dobar dan. Ja sam Marija Šakić-Velić, pročelnica Odjela za psihologiju na Hrvatskom katoličkom sveučilištu i sve vas srdačno pozdravljam i zahvaljujem na vašem dolasku. Posebno pozdravljam našeg uvaženog gosta, profesora dr. Hansa Zollnera i zahvaljujemo na njegovoj suradnji i trudu uloženom u današnje predavanje. Dear Professor Zollner, I wish you a warm welcome at our university and we are grateful for your cooperation and effort in preparing today's lecture. Današnje predavanje predstavlja priliku da se upoznamo sa radom jedne ugledne ustanove, Institutom za psihologiju Papinskog sveučilišta Gregorijana, i s druge strane da progovorimo o jednom važnom, ali nažalost aktualnom problemu seksualnog zlostavljanja djece i pitanju zaštite ove najosjetljivije i najranjivije skupine u našem društvu. Vjerujemo da će predavanje biti poticaj da razmislimo i raspravimo o ovim temama. Ja ću riječ prvo prepustiti profesoru dr. Emiliju Marinu, prorektoru za nastavu na Hrvatskom katoličkom sveučilištu, koji će vas pozdraviti u ime našeg sveučilišta, a potom će kolega sa Odjela za psihologiju, dr. Josip Bošnjaković, predstaviti našega gosta. Nakon predavanja predvidjeli smo vrijeme za raspravu i pitanja i od strane nas i od strane publike i nakon što završimo sa predavanjem i sa raspravom je predviđeno malo druženje u vijećnici na prvom katu, pa vas pozivamo da nam se i tu pridružite. Evo, zahvaljujem na vašoj pažnji i prepuštam riječ dr. Emiliju Marinu.
Dobar dan, preuzvišeni kolegice i kolege, dame i gospodo. Evo, čast mi je u ime našeg rektora, koji je odsutan ne samo iz Zagreba, nego iz ovog kontinenta, pozdraviti vas i uvaženog profesora Zollnera, koji nam dolazi sa slavne Gregorijane, kao što znamo. To sveučilište pripada jednom malom broju papinskih sveučilišta, što je jedna druga kategorija od one u kojem smo mi, katolička sveučilišta, i o tome je govorio kad je bio ovdje za dan našeg sveučilišta kardinal Zenon Groholevski. Vjerojatno jedan broj vas je to i čuo ili čitao njegovo predavanje u povodom dana sveučilišta. U memoriji Hrvata to sveučilište je osobito značajno jer je jedna značajna osoba iz naše vjerske i znanstvene prošlosti i notabene jedan Isusovac bio glasoviti profesor na tom sveučilištu i za njega svi znate, a to je Ruđer Bošković. I nedavno je u čast Ruđera Boškovića i podignuta jedna spomen ploča u atriju sveučilišta Gregorijana. Međutim, nakon Ruđera Boškovića, evo imali smo u naše vrijeme jednog drugog profesora koji je, hvala Bogu, još živ, ali kažem imali smo ga jer je profesor emeritus, a to je Isusovac profesor Ivan Fuček, koji je bio dugogodišnji redoviti profesor na Gregorijani, dapače prvi redoviti profesor Hrvat na Gregorijani nakon Ruđera Boškovića, a sada je u jednoj, recimo to tako, stvaralačkoj mirovini u Istri, dijelom u Isusovačkoj kući u Opatiji, a dijelom u Redemptoris Mater u Puli. Bene, caro professore, benvenuto qui nella nostra giovane Università Cattolica. Io ho detto 2 o 3 parole in croato spiegando che abbiamo avuto 2 illustri professori alla vostra gloriosa Pontificia Università Gregoriana, quello che è conosciuto da tutti, Ruđer Bošković, che da qualche anno fa anche ha ricevuto una targa in suo onore nell'atrio della Gregoriana, e poi un nostro connazionale e contemporaneo, ora professore emerito, padre Ivan Fuček. Ecco, benvenuto alla nostra università e spero che questo incontro tra un studioso che viene da una vecchia e gloriosa università e tra i studiosi che sono attualmente in questa più giovane università croata e la prima università cattolica in croata sia fruttuoso. Grazie, benvenuto.
Dear Professor, let me introduce you to our audience, describing shortly, I hope, your significant work in the field of psychology and church. Redoviti profesor dr. Hans Zollner, katolički je svećenik, redovnik je družbe Isusove, rođen je u Regensburgu. Studirao je filozofiju, teologiju i psihologiju u Regensburgu, Innsbrucku i u Rimu. Bio je 2 godine nakon svećeničkog ređenja kapelan na sveučilištu u Minhenu, doktorirao je iz područja teologije, a završio specijalizaciju iz psihoterapije. Također je od 2004. godine upisan u psihološku komoru pokrajine Bavarske u Njemačkoj. Od 2003. godine predaje na već spomenutom Papinskom sveučilištu Gregorijana, gdje je od 2010. godine vicerektor, kada postaje i redoviti profesor. Na istom sveučilištu predaje pri Institutu za psihologiju, gdje je ujedno i predstojnik toga instituta i upravlja Centrom za zaštitu djece. Od 2010. do 2012. član je radne znanstvene skupine Okrugli stol zlostavljanje maloljetnika pri vladi Republike Njemačke. Od siječnja 2012. predsjeda povjerenstvom Centar za zaštitu djece Instituta za psihologiju pri Papinskom sveučilištu Gregorijana, a od veljače 2012. predsjeda povjerenstvom za organizaciju simpozija na temu prema ozdravljenju i obnovi u okviru seksualnog zlostavljanja maloljetnika, o čemu će, vjerujem, i sam profesor progovoriti. Od ožujka ove godine član je Papinske komisije za zaštitu maloljetnika pri Svetoj stolici. Bio je član različitih časopisa i dan danas je jedan od članova uredništva časopisa Religions koji izlazi u Bazelu. Područje zanimanja su psihologija i duhovnost, istraživanje na području zaštite djece i prevencija seksualnog iskorištavanja djece, duhovnost i terapeutski proces i još neka druga područja. Predaje, dakle, na navedenom sveučilištu Gregorijana i drži konferencije u različitim mjestima Europe. Prvi puta je u Hrvatskoj, također imao predavanja u Africi, Aziji i Latinskoj Americi. Kao autor i suautor izdao je više knjiga iz područja koje smo već spomenuli, kao i znanstvene članke u različitim časopisima izašlih u više jezika. Među njima istaknuo bih samo par. Na hrvatskom izašla knjiga u suautorstvu sa Giovanni Cucci, Crkva i pedofilija, psihološko-pastoralni pristup. Zatim u suautorstvu sa Šiklunom i sa Ajote izdao je, dakle, kompend ili zbornik sa simpozija koji je bio na Gregorijani 2012. prema ozdravljenju i obnovi, simpozij održan, dakle, na Gregorijani. I jedan od zadnjih, dakle, članaka izašlih opet vezanih uz navedenu temu jeste Prevention of Sexual Abuse, Improved Information is Crucial. So, ladies and gentlemen, join me to welcoming Profesor Hans Zollner.
Eccellenze. Thank you very much for the welcome. I'm glad that I'm here and we can have this hour or so of encounter. I'm really happy to meet you, students and staff, teachers at this young university. It's always good to see young people who want to endeavor into human sciences, into the science of human life, and to do this within a Catholic framework. So this will be important for the future of our societies. So wish you all the best for the development of this university. I've just been introduced to some of the new projects that you have here. So my presentation has two parts. The first one will be much shorter than the second one. I was asked to present also the Institute of Psychology of the Gregorian University. That is a bit strange for me to talk about this, because you don't talk about the institute at which you teach or work, but you talk about your work, what you do there. Anyway, the Institute of Psychology of the Pontifical Gregorian University. Now,
first of all, there is a distinction between pontifical universities and Catholic universities. I believe your vice-rector has mentioned when Cardinal Krokolewski was here. A Catholic university is normally open to any kind of subject, of matter. A pontifical university is supposed to train priests, seminarians, religious, lay people in the so-called sacred sciences. And what are the sacred sciences? Theology, philosophy, canon law, and church history. Now, in some of the pontifical universities, the Salesian University is also represented here, we have also institutes or faculties of psychology or social sciences or communication sciences. At the Gregorian University, what was also mentioned by your vice-rector, we had a long history from the beginning in 1551 that there was natural science, one of the biggest parts of the university. The Gregorian calendar was developed in that what was to become the Gregorian University because of Pope Gregory XIII. So astronomy was taught there, physics was taught there, mathematics, statistics was taught there. So even at that time, and we talk about the 16th, 17th, and 18th century, there was natural science and human science present. Much of language studies was done. Unfortunately, since the Restoration, French Revolution, Restoration, within the church there was much more distance to those sciences. And only with the Second Vatican Council, that interest has grown again. So the Institute of Psychology at the Gregorian University was founded in 1971 by two Jesuits, two Italian Jesuits, who had gone to the United States, to Chicago University, and they had studied psychology. One of them was, before he entered into the Society of Jesus, a surgeon. He was a medical doctor. Then he entered into the society. The other one was a philosopher. And both went to Chicago to study psychology and to do a doctorate in a research project that had this goal: to find out what brings a person to enter into a novitiate of a religious order or into a seminary, priest seminary. What does formation do to them during that formation period, during novitiate, during seminary years? And when they leave, eventually, many of them at that time at least left novitiate, seminary, vocation. What has changed in those years when they were in religious formation? They worked with 1,000 people in male and female seminaries, religious life, etc. And they presented the results in 1970, 1971 in a big publication. And the result was, what does change between the entrance into religious life, into seminary, and those who have left the seminary and novitiate and the religious life? The answer is practically nothing. Almost nothing changes when you enter into a seminary or a novitiate and you undergo the normal formation. Because in formation, as it is normally conceived, you receive much input on spirituality, you learn to pray, you do retreats, you learn about theology, maybe a bit about the Bible, about the church's teaching, etc. But the problem is, that remains basically here. Not very often it really touches deeper levels of the person and the personality. So these two Jesuits spoke about this and published then the results of this research project and got an international award for this, an award that is given every 5 years in Europe by the Society for Psychology of Religion. This was the starting point of, let me say, the conceptual framework of what we offer at the Institute of Psychology at the Gregorian University. Because we serve mostly priests and religious institutions, congregations, orders around the world, because we try to prepare psychologists and psychotherapists for a work in formation, that means in church terms, in the formation from the entrance into seminary or novitiate to ordination and beyond. So our institute is, in that sense, really focused on forming religious and priests. In 43 years of life of this institute, we have had only very, very few lay people who graduated from this institute. And this was by purpose, because from the results of the research, the two founding fathers and the rector of the Gregorian at that time concluded that it will be most important and most helpful for the church to have specialists who can address certain issues during formation, so that what people get as an input in spirituality, theology, in the lifestyle, community life, etc., really touches their hearts, changes and transforms them, so that they become better ministers and better servants to the Lord in what they are supposed to do. So our aim is normally to train people who are supposed to become rectors of seminaries, novice mistresses, directors of formation houses. We have a few lay people who have graduated, I said. One is from Sarajevo. She is at the moment in a doctoral program. She is married last year, and she does a doctoral project on the psychodynamics in people who prepare to marry within a Catholic environment. So people who are Catholics and want to marry in the Catholic rite, in the Catholic Church. So what does the preparation period for marriage provoke in them in terms of psychodynamics? That is her doctoral project. I'm looking forward to seeing the results of that. So our study program foresees a propedeutic year, 2 years of a licentiate cycle, then a supervised practice year, an internship, and the possibility to go on with a doctoral cycle. Our licentiate is recognized by the Italian state as equivalent to the formation in any state faculty in Italy. I will briefly talk about the method, which explains why we accept only 16 students per year, per class. So in 4 years we have around 60 students, plus some doctoral students. We have applicants from all over the world. So we serve the Catholic Church. We have 16 spots, 16 places per year, and we have about 50 to 60 applicants per year. Those applicants have to undergo personality assessment. They have to hand in their study documents. We accept only people who have studied at least to a bachelor degree at another university. The bishop or the religious superior of this person should also commit himself or herself to say at least, I think this person will later on work in formation, in Christian Catholic formation work. Our study method is seminars, so we have actually no lectures, no lectures like this one, but our students receive a package of articles and book chapters. Let me say on Monday they receive 100 pages to read, and on Friday in the seminar session we discuss what they have read or are supposed to have read. So, and on Thursday receive another package for Monday, and so forth. So within 3 or 4 years of formation they really receive a lot of information on psychology, academic psychology, as it is studied in any place, in any faculty. Our textbooks are the American standard textbooks. Our strong points in the formation program are certainly psychology of religion and the framework within. We try to see psychology within a Christian value framework. We could discuss about this. I think this is not the point today. Our other strong point is psychopathology. We teach very thoroughly psychopathology, which helps us especially in the selection process of candidates to religious life to sort out people who should not enter from the beginning, should never enter into a novitiate or into a seminary. What is also combined, and this is probably in some way unique at least to most of European countries, is that we propose to students what we call individual vocational growth sessions. That is, every student who starts our course from the beginning agrees to meet one person with whom he or she will have meetings twice a week, 45 minutes, in a psychodynamic methodology, and we are from the psychodynamic depth psychology school, so that at least in a process of 2 years, maybe 3 years, this person comes to know oneself better. Because we believe that you can accompany people only well enough if you know your own limits, your own strengths, and your own wounds, and that you have come to a certain reconciliation with your past. Otherwise, the danger would be that you repeat those mistakes that have been done to your life and in your formation with others. So we offer this, what we call vocational growth sessions, and we aim at an integration of human and spiritual growth. Because when people ask me now, how do you distinguish between spiritual and human growth? How do you distinguish between what is the human area of formation and the spiritual formation? I always say, listen, this is spirituality, here, that part of my soul, and that part is the human part. That does not work. We are one person. Okay, you can and you should distinguish, but you cannot separate them. So what I learn in spirituality has an influence on my human growth. And what I learn, for example, in studying, has an effect on my spirituality. And I believe seriously that one of the reasons, the deeper reasons for the crisis that we live in the church today is that we have grown very much on the human side, but we stick to a model of spirituality that is far behind that human growth. Therefore, I dare to say, in this place here, in a young university, I hope what I've said, for example, in UKU, Ukrainian Catholic University some years ago, still a young university also there, that you keep alive also spirituality among you, and not only, I mean, trying to offer the best academic formation, because our purpose has to be that there is also a spiritual foundation to it. But this is an interaction. The interaction is necessary. What we learn, what we work, what we achieve, the big conferences that will be held here, etc. How does it influence, how does it question our understanding of being Catholics in this world, in this society, in Croatia, here in this part of the world? So anyway, we aim at this to better that human and spiritual integration, so that people can really serve, as our graduates normally do. Almost all of them have worked or work in formation settings. I've already mentioned this. I just want to mention one more thing, that is in 14 parts of the world, 14 countries, there are schools for formators that have been founded and are run by our graduates. For example, in Europe we have in Poland, in Spain and in Italy such formators schools. In the other continents there are more of those schools that serve the local churches to prepare formators in a similar way as we do. Now, this is part one, the Institute of Psychology of the Gregorian University. If you really want to know more, we can return to that at the end of the second part. I have been invited to talk about the Center for Child Protection of the Gregorian University, and I want to start with my personal experience, because I came to Rome and I was supposed to teach psychotherapy, psychology of religion, and then at a certain point I came to this topic of child sexual abuse and its prevention. Why? On 29th of January 2010, I saw the news on the internet that a German Jesuit in Berlin, the rector of a gymnasium, a college school, had called for a press conference, and during that press conference he spoke openly about the sexual abuse that had been committed by 3 Jesuits in Berlin, in that school, in the early 1970s and 1980s, by 3 Jesuits. And this, from that moment on, 29th of January 2010, created a huge media tsunami, a huge interest in this question, child sexual abuse in the church in Germany, in Austria, in Switzerland, in Central Europe, and it finally came also to Rome. I don't talk about the Anglophone countries, especially US, Ireland, United Kingdom, Australia. They are sensitive on this issue since 1985, but here in Europe we really, had to deal with the issue only in 2010. Now, from end of January on, there was only one news in German newspapers and on German media, and that was Catholic Church is child sexual abuse. For 5 or 6 months, there was no other news that was so important than this. It was always on number 1. And I have to say that I got more and more uncomfortable and nervous about the reaction, not about the media, but of the Catholic Church. Our representatives, especially the German Bishops' Conference, was not able to respond in a reasonable way to the media attacks. First, there are 27 ordinary bishops in Germany, so there were 27 different voices, at least. And one said, this is only a media campaign. The other bishop said, no, that's the truth and we have to face it. One said, we don't pay anything to victims. The other said, of course we will pay. So it was total confusion. Second, the official reply to the media was given 6 weeks after that huge scandal interest started. 6 weeks, the German Bishops' Conference took 6 weeks to give an official reply to all those accusations. Now, we know, all of us who use smartphones and internet and email and so, 6 weeks in today's media and technology, communication technology world is eternity. So in German we say, in those 6 weeks, das Kind ist mit dem Bad ausgeschüttet worden. So the scandal was created and there was no way back. So we had to face that situation that only the church was in the focus, and the Catholic Church was in the focus of the media, as if sexual abuse of minors happens only in the church. Okay, I just wanted to mention this because for me that was the starting point to take more interest in this topic than I had already had during my study years. In psychotherapy, at least in my formation, we learned about pedophilia, but this was a subject among others. In 2002, when Cardinal Ratzinger was still the prefect of the Congregation for Doctrine of Faith, he had called the American bishops after the huge scandal in Boston and in the whole United States to report on this. And from 2002, there were news in the German newspapers. But for me it was strange, because from 2002 to 2010, every 3 or 5 or 6 months, you would read a short news about priest in this city has abused children or minors, he goes to jail. And there was a news for 1 or 2 days, it was in the news, next day over. 5 months, nothing. After 5 months, again a case in the news, and so forth. Until 2010. And then, from one moment to the other, an explosion of interest. So why? Why did journalists not pick up earlier? Why did they interest themselves so much in 2010? We don't know, actually. But this happens and has happened in many countries. This has happened in Poland. I was 2.5 years ago, I was in Warsaw, and just before I had landed to address a group of Christian psychotherapists, a journalist had published a book, You Should Have Fear, turning around John Paul II's words, you should not have fear. And this journalist attacked the Polish media because they were not really focusing on child sexual abuse in the church. Now, if you have followed the recent news about the former Archbishop Wesolowski, the nuncio in the Dominican Republic and previously in other countries, who has been laicized and is in jail now and will be tried according to the Vatican State law on child sexual abuse because he has abused numerous boys in the Dominican Republic and we don't know what he has done before in other countries. So in Poland, in the last 2 years, there is much more interest and much more awareness also in the society on this topic. And what Dr. Josip had mentioned, the symposium that you organized 2.5 years ago at the Gregorian, it was meant to raise sensibility among church leaders around the globe on this, and I was very happy that we could publish the acts of this symposium in 12 languages, 6 of them in Central and Eastern European languages, including Croatian. He has quoted the 2 titles of those books that have also been published in Croatian, because I believe that sooner or later the Croatian church will have to face this also in a more public atmosphere, in a much more, let me say, aggressive perhaps also situation. This so much to my personal background, why and how I came to this topic. In 2010, the German government, the German federal government in Berlin, established a round table on sexual abuse in society, sexual abuse of minors in society. And this round table had 3 working groups, one on prevention, one on juridical aspects, and one on research. And my provincial, I'm a German Jesuit, and my provincial in Germany delegated me to that working group on research that was run by the Federal Minister for Research in Germany, in Berlin. So I went from Rome to Berlin 3 times, and there were meetings with the who is who in that research field. And I came to know a professor in a state university in Ulm, which is in the southwest of Germany, a small university clinic for psychiatry, and in this case, this professor has been and is the head of this psychiatric unit for minors at a state university in Ulm. And he presented to that round table meeting a research project on e-learning, so an internet-based learning platform that he developed with his team in Ulm that was offered to teachers and medical personnel in Germany and should help for prevention of sexual abuse. So it's not about therapy for victims. It's not about therapy for abusers, perpetrators. It's about preventing abuse so that abuse does not happen. And we decided in 2011 that we would found a Center for Child Protection jointly between the Gregorian University, the Archdiocese of Munich, and this Department of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. The Archdiocese of Munich, why? Remember in 2011, who was Pope? Benedict XVI, who had been before he became Pope, prefect of the Congregation for Doctrine, and before that he was Archbishop in Munich. So the Archdiocese of Munich had much interest to show that the Archdiocese does something in the field of prevention. And what they normally do, the rich German dioceses, they give a little of money for this. So we established this CCP, Center for Child Protection, in Munich for a pilot phase of 3 years. We got the permission from the ministry, from the German Research Ministry, to use that program that the professor in Ulm had developed for our church purposes. And we want to see within 3 years whether and how this works in different cultural and in different linguistic contexts. So our aim was to create a global e-learning training program for pastoral professions with many languages and addressing intercultural issues, so that we can have a web-based, internet-based, certified education and training program that is systematic and case-based, and we have translated the German text and adapted it in 3 other languages: English, Spanish, and Italian. And this is all meant to help professionals in the pastoral field to be better able to address issues of possible or real sexual abuse of minors. The learning objectives are awareness building and capacity building. So the empowerment approach means that those who participate should become more able to respond to critical situations, that they are more sensitive when they work with minors, and this should be a combined learning process and acquiring of capacity through academic knowledge, but also of skill development. And an important part in this work is also that you get more knowledge about the legal implications. What does the law in your country say? Not only the church law, but also the law of your state or country in which you live. As I've said, we address at this point pastoral professions, all kinds of them: priests and deacons, male and female religious, parish assistants, teachers, catechists, volunteers, etc. We have at the moment, and we are concluding that project phase, 1,000 registered participants and 40 trainers. This is the curriculum. As you see, there are about 27 learning units, and the learning unit consists of introduction, basic text, quiz, examination. And then you have certain case studies in different of those areas. You have case studies. All this is presented online. So you register online, you can sign in every now and then, you can go in your own pace, you can take your time, you can repeat, you can return to certain learning units. And the learning units are divided in general aspects, risk and protective factors, identification, interaction, rehabilitation, and then specific context, for example, the intercultural aspect. The second column here, the theological, that was fully our work with my team in Rome. We had to develop this because in the German state curriculum there was obviously no theological part, so we had to work out biblical aspects, canon law, pastoral aspects, and the question of theology in front of the question, now what does abuse tell us about our faith? As I said, you can register online. That's the only possibility that you access at this point, only within the chosen participants from those partners with whom we work. But in terms of learning methodology, we favor blended learning, which means that you don't do only the online course yourself, but there is another complementary part to it, that means where there are trainers, where you have some interaction, where you have group work on those issues. This is much more helpful also because many people who deal with the abuse issue for the first time, they really find it very hard, they find it very demanding and an emotional stress. So at least you have to the opportunity to share with other people. We would very much favor that. We have started to work in 8 countries with 8 partners, and 3 more were added after the first year. So we started with 2 dioceses in Europe, one in Germany, in Munich, and one in Italy, with 2 dioceses in Argentina and in Ecuador, 2 dioceses in Ghana and in Kenya, and then, because I didn't find so fast bishops from Asia who wanted to participate, so I asked the Jesuits in India and in Indonesia to participate. These were the original 8, and then we have, in the meantime, 3 more, the Archdiocese of Santiago in Chile, another diocese in Germany, and the Jesuits in Poland. So from all these, we have expected that they register 100 participants, and we have followed up on how many dropouts do we have, what is the learning results, how is the feedback on certain learning units, etc., etc. Just to give you an image of how international this is, these are our trainers worldwide who had come to our 2nd international conference in Munich in November last year. So our program is, by way, not the only program, e-learning program, prevention program that you have worldwide, but probably it's the only one that really addresses the international Catholic community. You have very good programs in the US, you have very good programs in Ireland, but you have very few programs that go beyond one culture, one language. So we think that we have to address the issue for the worldwide Catholic community, and this is our purpose to offer what we have as a service. Last photo is from the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors. Our CCP from the Gregorian University is not directly linked to it, but obviously since there are 2 Jesuits from the Gregorian, Father Yannis and myself, there is a certain, let me say, overlap, and I'm also in charge of the working group of this commission for seminary formation and religious formation, and what can we do in terms of prevention work. So this is what I wanted to say. I believe that the Church can do much in this field. We are under scrutiny from other people, especially from the media, but I think we can really contribute enormously to this field, and I believe that we are on a good way. In many countries, the Catholic Church is a leader in child protection. In many countries. This is not recognized by the public, but in many countries in the world, and I have seen quite a number of them in the last 4 years, the Church, the Catholic Church, is a leader in child protection. And I hope that we can go on in this line, because Jesus has come especially to cure those who are harmed and to protect the vulnerable. And if you remember the Gospel, that he says, let the little ones come to me. So the Church's mission is mainly, mostly, about this. Now, this is what I wanted to say at this point, and we have now time maybe for some questions.
Allora, caro professore, le ringrazio per questa relazione che è molto, direi, coinvolgente, non ci lascia indifferenti, è un discorso molto attuale. Thank you, grazie. Pripremajući se za današnji susret, razmišljali smo u našem timu koja pitanja bismo postavili profesoru, a vjerujem da onda neko i od vas da bi bio na tragu tih pitanja. Stoga ćemo na početku postaviti profesoru 2 pitanja, a onda iza toga ćemo evo dati priliku i vama da postavite 3 pitanja sve skupa, dakle tko želi postaviti pitanje. Prvo jeste negativni napisi, adesso le sto ponendo la domanda che la prima. Dakle, prvo pitanje, negativni napisi u medijima s obzirom na pedofiliju u crkvi su vrlo uočljivi. Zanima nas, s obzirom na poslanje Centra i Instituta na kojemu ste na čelu, prema vašem mišljenju, koji su putevi prevencije u formaciji svećenika danas, gledajući razinu obitelji ili župe, ali i crkve i društva?
So, prevention. Prevention starts with awareness. And if you go back into the last years, you will find out that awareness about the importance and the impact of sexual abuse of minors and other vulnerable people has increased enormously. We are here today because awareness has increased. 5 years ago, we would not be here. So, in the United States, from 1982, 1985 or so, in Canada, in Australia, awareness has increased enormously. In Ireland, I was in Ireland in 1996, and I was in Ireland 20 years later. There was nothing that had interested for many years the Irish public more than child sexual abuse. Since 20 years, every day there is news on page 1 of newspapers about sexual abuse or other kinds of abuse by Catholic institutions, Catholic priests, or religious sisters. So one thing is awareness. And awareness means that I really face reality. A month ago, UNICEF, the UN Organization for the Health of Children, has published a report where it says that between 8 to 12% of all children in this world are abused sexually. Now, how many millions are this? The Indian government, the Indian state government, federal government in India, has published in 2007 a statistics that 52% of all minors in India are abused sexually. Now, how many inhabitants do we have in India? 1.2 billion. How many are below 18? A third, which means 400 millions. 52% of these 400 millions, according to an Indian statistic, official government statistic, are abused sexually, which means 200 million people. we don't know about concrete numbers, because most abuse happens in families. And in families there is one strict law, and that means the family is above all, and you don't talk about it. It's very similar to what happens in the church in this respect. So what you can do when you study psychology or social science or communication, just keep alive that issue and don't run away, because it's a reality, and it's a very brutal reality. What is needed is the courage to face it. It's very ugly. It's ugly on all sides. It's ugly when you have to deal with a perpetrator, an abuser, who denies, I've never done this, I would never do it. And you know he is lying to you, and he's lying to himself. It's very ugly, and it's very demanding. It's also ugly, of course, because you have to deal with the victims. Now imagine, what can you do? How can you help a person whose soul has been destroyed? This photo was taken when we had 6 victims of abuse who the Holy Father wanted to meet personally on 7th of July, last July. And one of the ladies came from Germany, and I had to translate to the Holy Father what she was talking about. She had been abused by a chaplain in her parish when she was 9 years old. And she had been abused many times. And she said, from that moment on, my soul had left my body. Now, this lady has had, a very tough life. She went through everything: drugs, sects, no relationship, no children, many changes in where she lived and where she worked, and so. But in the end, she was fortunate enough to find somebody, a therapist, who could help her to grow out of the trauma. And now this same lady, after the meeting with the Holy Father, the encounter with the Holy Father, writes me every now and then and says, my soul is returning slowly to my body. And this lady is 62 now. So for 40 years, her soul was here and her body was there. So what you can do is, don't run away. Don't make it the most important topic in the church or in society. There are other important topics. But really take seriously the suffering of victims. And when you have listened to one of them only one of them, and you have really listened, then you will understand what is at stake, what is important, and how much needed is your courage to speak about it. So there are many things we can do. You have to inform yourself. What do I do if I encounter a child from one day to the other very much changed? Doesn't want to that it is approached. Until now, it received my hug or my touch very, very naturally. From one day to the other, runs away, becomes shy, doesn't talk anymore. So what has happened? Maybe this child has been abused. Now, you should inform yourself. Now, how do I do? What do I do in this situation? Whom do I approach? With whom do I speak? How do I react with the child? How do I react with the person who may be the perpetrator? What is the law in my country? Are you supposed, as psychologists in this country, in Croatia, to report to police? Is a medical doctor supposed to report to police? In many countries, there is no obligation. But what do you do if you are in such a situation? You should know about that. And I would say, again, what I said at the end of my talk here, as Catholic Church, we can be the front runner, the leader in child protection. We should be the leader in child protection. This is about the most precious gift that human beings can have, children. And children who can believe in God. Now, people ask very often, what is the difference? What is the specific Catholic part if there is an abuse by a priest? I have found out through contact with victims that the abuse committed by a priest is so much more damaging than any other abuser, because in a child the capacity to believe in God is destroyed, or can at least be destroyed. And this, according to our anthropology, is the most precious gift that human beings have, the capacity to believe in God. Yeah.
Drugo jedno pitanje. Iz vaše perspektive, kako gledate... Iz vaše perspektive, kako gledate na problem da se pedofilija znatno naglašava kada su u pitanju svećenici, a primjerice kada su u pitanju ljudi drugih zanimanja, kao što su liječnici, političari, učitelji, ti slučajevi nisu toliko atraktivna, o njima se toliko ne priča?
In fact, it is clear that there is a disproportion, much more interest focusing on the Catholic Church. The number 2 Minister for Justice from Australia told me some weeks ago, from Australia, and in Australia there is at the moment a very difficult situation for the Catholic Church. But he told me that according to their statistics in Australia, 95% of abuse, sexual abuse of minors, happens in families. 95%. Actually, this is one number, one figure. We don't, in no country there exists an exact statistics. There cannot be, because if 95% happens in families, so who from in the families will talk about it? So, but if you take this number, 95% of abuse happens in families, 5% happens in all other institutions, sports clubs, scouts, music clubs, associations, etc., etc., and in the church. Now, why is there so much interest in the abuse that is committed by priests? Why? I think especially for 2 reasons. One is that the Catholic Church is perceived and wants to be perceived as an institution that is meant for the healing of people and not for hurting them. The Catholic Church proposes itself as giving the good news to people and not the bad news. So people expect much from us. And any single case where this expectation is not met with is a huge disillusionment. And I think that is one of the reasons why we should take seriously and this whole issue, and also the attacks by media. There are journalists who really want to strike at the church. And in the United States, especially, there are people who are specialized to go against the church. That exists. But many journalists, I believe, show that they want the church to wake up and to really take on the task that is ours. That is to really reform ourselves, to go back to the roots and to become radical in this sense, and to live what we say. It's just that simple, and not to live another life, hidden and protected. Just say that what you really live, and live what you say. This is what a priest promises when he is ordained. So, one reason is this: there is a high expectation, and I believe this expectation is justified. We say we want to be better in moral terms, in loving people, and not in abusing them. So each and every single case of abuse goes against our innermost message. The second reason is the Catholic Church is perceived as one unit. When I gave my first television interview, that was in March 2010, just after the start of the scandals in Germany, the journalist had asked about why is the church involved in this and that, and then cut, and we closed, and then I say to this lady, I say, now listen, in Germany, yesterday, a couple was tried for abuse, and they go to jail now. The stepfather had abused the 8-year-old daughter of his new partner. And the mother of the child had taken a video with her smartphone. So they were tried, they were sentenced, and they went to jail. And I say to this journalist, now, what do you say to this? I mean, they are not Catholics. And she says, yeah, but Father, you see, this is a single case. The Catholic Church is one. You can smile about it, I don't understand it actually, fully at least, but this is the perception with which we have to deal. If one priest, if one archbishop in Dominican Republic, in this nuncio in Dominican Republic abuses boys on the beach, this is known everywhere. If somebody in Zagreb, parents or a stepfather abuses his stepdaughter here, nobody knows about it, and nobody's interested to know. That's the difference. So we have to deal with another kind of perception, which again shows something about our own Catholic self-understanding that we transport to others. Because we say we are one. It's one church. But what does it mean really to be one church? I give you just one example concerning our topic. In 2011, the Congregation for Doctrine of Faith, that is the church ministry for faith issues and for juridically dealing with sexual abuse, had written to all bishops' conferences, 112 bishops' conferences in the world, all of them, that by June 2012, 1 year later, they should hand in guidelines how in this bishops' conference, which may comprise more countries, but in this bishops' conference, how they are to deal with victims, perpetrators, prevention, priestly formation, etc., etc. By June 2012, a year later, only 80% of bishops' conferences had handed in. Although, I mean, the Congregation for Doctrine is the #1 ministry in the church. There is, beyond that is only the Pope. But 20% of bishops' conferences didn't do anything. Until now, 2.5 years after the deadline, still 5 or 6 bishops' conferences have not done anything. What does it show? It shows that the Catholic Church is not a body of absolute unity. At least in many aspects, every bishops' conference, every bishop, ordinary bishop, does what he wants or what he considers to be the right choice. And that does not correspond necessarily to what Rome is asking. So I think it brings us also to the point to think about, now, how do we really relate to each other? What does it mean, unity and diversity at the same time in the Catholic Church? Cardinal Ratzinger in 2000 took away the responsibility for the juridical cases that deal with priests who have abused minors, took away the responsibility from the Congregation for Clergy and brought it to the Congregation for Doctrine, and took it away from the local dioceses. Why? Because on the local level and in the clergy congregation, it was not dealt with according to church law, not even according to church law. We don't talk about civil law. But bishops would not follow the church law. And here is another point, and with this I conclude for the moment then. We could learn, the Catholic Church is worldwide and is present in 192 countries or so. So we could learn from each other. And I tell you frankly, I believe that this is not happening. If you talk only about our topic here, how would a bishops' conference react? How would a Catholic public institution react to accusations of sexual abuse that has been committed in this institution, in this school, in this university? How would you react? I believe that there is no strategic plan. There is no management of accusations, etc., etc. Whereas when you go to the United States, you have wonderful models for this. In Ireland, you have wonderful models that cannot be applied to Croatia or to Germany or to Italy because our laws and sensitivities and our words, language is different. But we could at least take some model for our own rules and norms. But we don't do it because it seems as if each and every local church has to undergo the same crisis like in the States, like in Canada, like in Ireland, like in Germany. So my appeal is, prepare yourself. Prepare yourself better. The Polish bishops seem to move a bit recently, not without the pressure from the press, but there is also some movement that is going faster than the press can move. But unfortunately, many parts of, don't talk about Africa. Don't talk about some countries in Latin America or in Asia. One argument is always, this has not happened in our church. In Poland I've heard very often that argument. We didn't have sexual abuse of minors committed by priests because otherwise the communists would have exploited that. They would have taken advantage if they had known that there was an accusation against the priest. Now, in Poland itself, I heard the counter-argument, and that goes like that. Of course they knew when a priest had abused, but they didn't go public. They called the priest and said, listen, we know about you. Now, how can you help us? How can you work with us? We will be quiet, but you work with us. So except there were no schools, there were no hospitals, there were no kindergarten, there was nothing, okay? But still abuse happened and the communists knew. But they used that information in a different way. So talk to canon lawyers, they know that in every place in the church happens abuse of minors. There is no place where it does not happen. So we have to face that reality. But again, returning, we can do much for a better society and for better protection of children.
Thank you for your answers. Hvala lijepo na odgovorima. Vjerujem da i već ovi odgovori pobuđuju i druga pitanja među nama. Svjestan sam da imamo i drugih obveza i predavanja, no ostavit ćemo prostora za još 3 pitanja, dakle, vama. No, prije bih htio zamoliti da kada postavljate pitanje, da sačekate da dođe mikrofon kako bi mogli svi čuti. Možete postaviti pitanje, ako je moguće, na engleskom, ako ne, onda i na hrvatskom. Evo, izvolite. Stiže mikrofon.
Thank you, Professor, for your brilliant lecture. I would like to say that I'm confident how the Pope put this hard task to very brilliant persons. From today I know you, but I would like to comment as you projected this slide here, this photo. I know well 2 of these members, the lady on the left, Hanna Suchocka, that was the Prime Minister of Poland, the first lady in the history, Prime Minister of Poland, and later for many years Ambassador of Poland to the Holy See, and a good friend and colleague of mine. And the person on the right, Cardinal O'Malley, whom I know also well, who is, if I may say, a brilliant Archbishop of Boston, a cardinal who is one adorator of our Saint Leopold Mandic in Padova. So I know personally more than 1/3 of this Pontifical Commission, and I'm very glad for that, and I hope you will do the good task. As historian, I would like to put one question to you, Professor. You underlined how all this arrived only, for Europe especially, in January 2010, and you underlined that quite clear. Do you have any explanation, is there any, if I may say, historical answer why it arrived in 2010 and not earlier? There are perhaps some theories, I know some of them, but you are certainly the most competent to share with us if there is any reasonable explanation why it arrives only in 2010.
Can you share the theories?
No, after you. I will give to you I will say later if you wish what I have some.
I have no explanation for this. The fact is that in 2002, when Cardinal Ratzinger had called the US bishops to report on this in the Vatican, for example, the the Dutch bishops, the bishops from the Netherlands, had made a big publicity campaign and had invited victims of abuse to come forward, and they would be ready, the bishops from the Netherlands, they would be ready to receive victims. They would help them in therapy, they would listen to them, they would give them money. Only 20 to 30 victims came forward in 2002. In 2010, 8 years later, when the scandal broke in Germany, all of a sudden there were thousands of victims in the Netherlands who came forward. And these victims had not been victimized in those 8 years. So they were, almost all of them were referring back to 30, 40, 50 years or so. So one aspect in all this is, why do people not talk about the abuse they have suffered? And this is a sort of a mystery. Obviously, a person has to be strong enough to face that reality and has to feel secure and safe enough in talking about it. Most victims of abuse do not like to be known personally, but they want to be listened to. So there is this tension. If I talk about it, I will be known. But if I do not talk about it, nobody will listen to me. So some people really bury this in the deepest angle, in the deepest level, if you wish, in the deepest freezer in their soul, where it is frozen and is kept away. You have to pay a price for that. But some people prefer this than to speak out. So actually, this is the only explanation why people would not talk, because they don't feel safe enough and they don't feel that they are really listened to. In brackets, that has nothing to do with your question, but in brackets, because this is important. The single most important thing that we can offer as a church to victims of abuse is listening. This is the single most important. Just stay with people who have suffered abuse of any kind, trauma, etc., and be with them. This is very demanding, because if you really listen, if you really open your heart, if you really open your ears, if you really open your eyes, that costs you something, and that will change you. Because you let the suffering of another person enter into yourself, and that changes you. But this is what 98% of victims expect, that a bishop sits down with them, or any representative of the church would sit down with them and just listen. And this is what the Pope did. At the beginning of the meeting, it was supposed to be 10 minutes with each victim, 6. And 10 minutes is already double of that time what the Pope normally spends with one single visitor. So 5 minutes, no, in this case 10. After the first victim went in, it took 10 and 20 and 45 minutes. So we realized that this morning will be very long, and he took for every single person more than half an hour. And this is the so brackets closed. No, I mean, there are some people who say that journalists wanted to attack Pope Benedict and his role in this, and until now, Pope Benedict, in many countries and among many journalists is seen as somebody who didn't do well with this issue, who postponed dealing with it, and so forth. This is, for me, one of the most unjust judgments that you can think of, because Pope Benedict started to really deal with the issue even when he was only the prefect of the Congregation for Doctrine. He realized, because he had all those papers with the, unbelievably mad and sad things that priests can do. He read it every day, and so he was converted in some way to really take on the issue, and he did. So some people say that it was because the leadership of Benedict should be attacked or so. This is another theory that I've heard. Maybe there are many factors. I'm now waiting for your contribution.
If you wish, but it's not important what I'm saying, but perhaps I would share with you, first of all, that when I listen to you, that is really a very, very strong lecture and a very difficult lecture that we have to understand from all what you said to us. Without diminishing what you told, I think that is 100% truth. I would like to put in another context that I was involved for 6.5 years in the world of the diplomacy. And the impression was that for many reasons, the press and somebody who is behind the press, for different reasons and from different point of view, wanted to attack Pope Benedict XVI. Although he was the person who, at least what we know, did the most against these abuses in his previous role as prefect and as the Pope. The same was why I think that is something true there. Perhaps it's not 100%, but almost the same was with his very known speech in Regensburg University, where was created, those who perhaps do not know what it was, after that speech arrived one enormous crisis between the, let's say, Catholic world and the Muslim world. The crisis and the reactions on the Pope's speech, actually it was not speech, it was a lecture that he delivered at the Regensburg University, did not start in any of the Muslim countries. The attacks, or critics if you wish, started in Western countries. From Western it was attacked, and then it developed, of course, in other countries. So something was, I think, very strong, perhaps because he was very active against these and others difficult issues and non-Catholic issues inside the Catholic Church. Perhaps because of that, something or somebody was very against the Pope Benedict XVI. And perhaps it was because, this is now my personal impression, because if we speak in a secular terms, if I may say, of course we know a bishop, a pope, he's a priest. But if we speak in a secular term, somebody is somehow a politician, other is somehow a priest, simple, humble priest. Somebody is a doctor, somebody is a prophet. And Pope Ratzinger, I think he remained professor. And for a professor, the truth is there, and I heard from many ambassadors, and ambassadors who had at that time, during his pontificate, one good, if I may say, attitude to the Roman Catholic Church, I heard something like this: now as a pope he cannot be more professor. And the speech, the famous speech of Regensburg, was a speech of a professor. Well, excuse me if I was too long.
Zahvaljujemo i vama, profesore. Izvolite za još moguća 2 pitanja. Izvolite.
First of all, thank you, Professor, for this interesting lecture. I was just wondering, do you think that anything could be done different, information and education of the future priests, to prevent child abuse in church?
Sure. Now, what could be done differently? I believe, first of all, that it's not so much a question of screening out pathological cases. Psychology can help there, but a normal human judgment can also help. Bishops normally see when a person is strange and should not be in the seminary. So they don't need, for pathological cases, you don't need a specialist in psychiatry to see that. To deal with it, yes, but to see that and to decide that this person should not enter into seminary or novitiate, I mean, normally you see that. Secondly, the whole area of affectivity, sexuality, relations should be a normal part and parcel of seminary formation. And I can tell you that the Congregation for Clergy, so that is the ministry for the priests in the church, is about to publish, to send out a document that will serve as the framework for priestly formation in every country around the world. They have worked on this recently and they have discussed it in their, what is called the plenaria, so the plenary session. Just 2 weeks ago, exactly 2 weeks ago today, there was a discussion on this. And when you read the Pope's speech to the cardinals and the archbishops and bishops who were there at the plenary session, when he received them in the audience, read it very carefully, because everything is there. He says, "My dear brother bishops, do not ordain people who are not really meant to be priests." And he says it with a very strong voice. He repeats it 2 or 3 times. "My dear bishops, what you do when you ordain people who are not meant, or admit to the seminary, or ordain people who are not meant to be priests, you do more harm to the church than anything else." So, Saint John Paul II has published in 1992 a paper that is called Pastores Dabo Vobis, that deals with priestly formation but can also be applied to religious formation. And there in number 43 you read, this is my favorite quotation, you read, "Human formation is the basis of all what follows: spiritual formation, intellectual formation, and pastoral formation. Without the basis," and this is John Paul II, this is no psychologists and no I don't know what. This is John Paul II. He says human formation is the basis of priestly formation in all the other areas that are also necessary, of course. So, in 2007, the Congregation for Catholic Education published a document on the use of psychology in priestly formation. And in 2007, it was still the Congregation for Catholic Education that had to oversee the seminaries. That is now passed on to clergy. Okay? In this document from 2007, psychology is mentioned as important for priestly formation in screening, that is in the admission process, is mentioned as a help during the formation process. But there is one sentence that is very interesting, and that reads like that. Every formator in the seminary should have basic knowledge in psychology. Every formator, every responsible person in the seminary should have basic knowledge in psychology. The rector, the prefect, the father spiritual, the other people who are involved in this should have basic knowledge. This is one of the reasons why I believe, where I believe that very, very, very few bishops really have followed what Rome wants, what they have expressed. Oh, I'm a psychologist, but I'm also a theologian. And for me, I'm not promoting psychology instead of spirituality. This is far from my own background and my own conviction. I believe spirituality is the core, the sublime end and the most important thing in human life as such. But psychology can help to live better. That's spirituality. So what we can do is to help young people to really grow humanly, spiritually, intellectually, and pastorally. And for this, we can offer many things. We can offer where they are lacking most. Many young people nowadays, for example, lack in stability and perseverance. If priesthood is a lifelong vocation, so how can you deal with people? I don't talk about you who are here now, obviously because you're far ahead of this, who are used to relationships from one night stands to half a year to 2 years, and then you split. To work in a company for a year or 5, 2, 3 more, etc., etc. What do we expect young people nowadays to really live out and to communicate to each other when they are used to 120 signs? How do we communicate to each other? People who are more present on Facebook than in their communities, in their families. So there is much to learn in terms of human formation, of relation. And I believe our seminaries could become experimental areas where you can really develop stable relationships, where you can express, where you can learn to express who you are and where you come from and what is really moving you, where you can become access to your emotional, affective side, where you learn that sexuality is a gift and not a danger, but a gift that can also be renounced for a higher gift, that is the reign of God. So I think there are good models, and overall there is much more attention nowadays. Overall, in many geographical zones, but still, I believe that much could be done in terms of really helping those young men who want to become priests, or those young women and men who want to become religious, or committed Christians and Catholics, to really come to terms with their own shortcomings, their own tensions. We do not need to become super women and super men. We should just become human. That is part of the spiritual vocation of Christians. And this is from the beginning, if you see the biblical side, and if you read John Paul II.
And the last one question, zadnje pitanje. Evo stiže mikrofon.
I think we should be first who says that the sexual abusing of minors is the biggest scandal in the world, and especially when Catholic parents or Catholic priest does it, beside the killing of unborn children. But second thing I wanted to say is that I think that our big problem, bad part of our Catholic culture is fear of talking. Pope, just a few days ago, I think on the beginning of the synod in the Rome, invited cardinals and bishops to feel free to talk, to feel free to talk, to say everything they think is important to say. And I think that we also have to face that thing, that bad part of our culture is that we are not enough free inside of our community to talk free. And I would like to hear your comment on that.
Your intervention shows that there is also the other side. So people speak out. And I believe there is much more than we normally perceive. Fear, psychologically, psychodynamically speaking, shows insecurity. So you are not sure enough about yourself, about your position, about your worth, and therefore you fear. Now let me put this into a bigger framework. The Catholic Church, until Vatican Council II, was like a big castle. It was defended well. Everybody knew where his or her place is. For everything there was one chamber and one minister and so forth. Everything was in its place. And it was from the beginning to the end the same. Vatican II changed that dramatically because the Church at that time, the bishops who were at Vatican II changed the outlook, and the doors of the castle were opened, and the people went out on the street. It was not closed anymore, and the people were out on the street. Now what happens if you leave your house and you go to Zagreb Center, you get lost. There are, even when you cross here, when you go out of the university, you have immediately two choices, left or right. And when you choose right, again, after 200 meters, another choice, left or right or straight. And then there come people who are not dressed like you and who think you are crazy because you're Christian. And they start to insult you or to discuss with you. And you realize, oh, there are people who do not think like me. In my castle, everybody thought like me. Everybody followed the same rule. But out there are other people, there are other philosophies, there are other political opinions, there are other religions. In short, I believe the bigger framework of that fear is, as Catholic Church, I believe we have not found yet our position in this world anew. We don't have the castle anymore, and it's impossible to have that castle anymore. Those people like Lefebvre, the traditionalists, they try to keep together and to rebuild the castle. That doesn't work anymore. I mean, you can have a little sect that lives in the castle, but 95% of humanity will think they are crazy. But on the other hand, we have not found yet our position, our outlook, our relationship to the world, because we do not accept everything that people say from other religions. We do not say that abortion is okay, as in Croatia, I don't know how many people, 30, 50% say abortion is okay. No, we don't agree. We don't agree on assisted suicide or something like that. Now, but to whom do we refer? The Pope has said you should not abort. This lady who has aborted doesn't care about the Pope. So, what kind of an argument do we present? What kind of consideration? What kind of value orientation? And how do we motivate it? I think the larger picture of this is we are not still sure where we are in relationship to the world. And that creates fear. So the fear means I close myself. I don't talk to you because you are from another party or another religion or another... Because if I come in touch with you, I may be affected. So what does it tell about our own convictions? And here again, I repeat what I said before. What does the crisis of the child sexual abuse in the church tell us about our own credibility, our own authenticity? Is it not a call from God to really reform ourselves? One question said, again here we are at the end of this presentation, huh? And very often the same happens. We do not ask, why has God allowed us to fall into that crisis? If God is the master of the history, why does he put us in that situation? There are people who work against us. Okay, I said it also in my talk here. There are people who hate us and who hate the church. Take only the one lady from the UN Child Protection Commission. She hates us, and she will do everything to destroy us. And we have to argue with her. But all the same, why could God allow that priests who are meant to heal and to spend sacraments and to journey with people on their faith journey, that these same priests who have been ordained to minister the Eucharist and the confession and all the sacraments abuse sexually minors? How can this be? And what does it tell us about priestly formation, priestly vocation? The question, how does it really affect our faith? Our faith, not the faith of the victim or the perpetrator, but our faith, our ecclesiology, so the understanding of the church, our understanding of soteriology, so how does God redeem us? How does it affect us? This question has not been answered. Not started to be answered. In 2012, when we tried to find a theologian, a great theologian who could talk at the symposium at the Gregorian on the theological side of abuse in the church, we were looking around worldwide and we did not find a single person. There is, on the part of theology, silence. And to date, I have not found a single voice of a theologian, and I don't talk about pastoral theology or so, but on systematic theology that tells us something, how we can theologically, how does our image of God change if we deal with abuse of minors in the church? The same question, what I asked before, how does our real life, the life in society and all what happens really interact with our faith? Do we pray for victims? Do we pray for the bishops who have to deal with it? Do we pray for the perpetrators who shall convert themselves? Do we really take this seriously in front of God? There is much fear. And this fear is blocking, is paralyzing. So, and this is the contrary to the gospel. This is the contrary to Jesus Christ's message of go out and preach the good news. And don't be fearful when you come to a city where they are against you. That has always been there. Go to the next city, preach to the lame, preach to those who don't want to come. But if they don't want, look for others. So what does it tell us about the mission of the church? Yes, I believe that there is some connection. I don't pretend to know what is there, but I think you see some connections between the fearfulness as such, in the sense of where are we as a church, and the fearfulness in connection to that issue of child sexual abuse. But I see also very positive signs. There is movement. As I said, the church is in many countries the leader in child protection. And there are surprisingly many initiatives around the globe where priests and nuns and lay people really work for the better of children. In India, there is no institution, not the state and no other institution, that does so much for young girls than the Catholic Church. In a country where Catholics are 2% of population, no other organization, no state in India does so much for girls and for young people than the Catholic Church. So there is also much what we don't see in Europe or in the Western world. So we have also to be careful to counterbalance that.
Zahvaljujemo na vašim pitanjima, na vašem strpljenju i drago nam je da ste vaše dragocjeno vrijeme odvojili za ovu još dragocjeniju, vjerujem, temu. Zamolio bih pročelnicu, docenticu Mariju Šakić-Velić da zaključi ovaj susret.
Professor Zollner, thank you for a very interesting and insightful lecture and for your patience in answering all the questions. I would like to invite Dr. Emilio Marin to present a small gift from our university so that you remember your visit here with us.
Professor, thank you very much.